All right, well, welcome back to part 2 of Russophobia and the Crimean War. Let's just jump right in because it's got a lot to cover. So we already talked about the Crimean War. It's 1853 to 1856. It was Russia's attempt to come down, to put down quickly an Ottoman Empire that was very weak, that had issues and practices that were against the Christian faith or different types of Christians. There was a chance that the holy places were going to be destroyed or abused. There was also this desire to take over the Constantinople and that the straits between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean to maintain trade. So all of this is going on. And yet what we found is this question was, during this time, France and England, strangely enough, jump in on the side of the Ottomans and come in and fight back, beat back the Russians, who, after the very first major attack, the battle at Sinop, looked like they would probably win this without any major casualties. Turn this into a big bloody bath and prolong the war. There was also the question of why did the West, why did England, France demonize Russia? What was that all about? What was that for? We looked at one possibility. The idea here again is the idea of the Russia being barbaric, evil, and expansionism. As I said, one reason may have been this idea of the Euro-Asian dilemma. Is Russia Asian or is Russia European? Because it encompassed so much and had so much different diversity, enveloped and made part of its empire, so many different cultures and religions, it was a little bit hard to identify them as who you are. Perhaps that was one. And I told you last time, this is not the one that I tend to fall back on. I think there was another reason behind it, and that's where we're going to go next. And that reason is the deliberate sabotage and slander of another country as a tactic or a political tactic. Well, how do you defeat your enemy? You make the world believe that he is bad. And by bad, that can mean any sorts of things. He's unethical. He is irreligious. He is ignorant, savage. He is unintelligent. Many things can be bad in it. He is evil and has no moral compass. Another one is that you make the world believe that his intentions are malicious. He's only doing this for self-gain. He's only doing this for profit. He's only doing this for money. So you either attack their intelligence, their personality, their person themselves, or the nation themselves, or you attack their actions and you give their actions a different narrative, a malicious, evil sort of narrative. And what's the goal? What do you do? What do you hope you will achieve by doing this? Well, one, you build a global hate for that enemy. They become the enemy. It's they against us, or it's them against me. And the me has to rise up to put them down, type of thing. You need to dehumanize the enemy. I want to be able to dehumanize them because then I can treat them with equal maliciousness. Whatever method I choose to use to put them down will be justified. They're not really human. They're savages. They're more animal than they are human. That's an important aspect of this game of sabotage. The other goal is that it will eliminate the chance of support. Nobody is going to say, well, wait a minute, I will stand by you, for any of these people that are dehumanized or considered or labeled bad, malicious, unintelligent, savage, evil. Nobody's going to align themselves with that. As soon as you align yourselves with that type, you stand on their side, it's political suicide. You're going to be ripped apart. The world will not have it, right? So those are the goals. And if these sound familiar to you, it should sound familiar to you, because these games, this creation of phobias is still and carried on ever since this time till the time that we have in our current era. And we will bring up this topic again and again and again. You want to win a battle, demonize the other side. You want to win an argument, make your opponent look like they are malicious and savage or unintelligent. They're somehow defective and need to be put down. They're rabid dogs that need to be shot. That's the name of the game. So, does this sound familiar of that time? Well, we talked in the unification of Germany about a fine gentleman, Otto von Bismarck, who was working with the Prussian army to build and unify Germany. But he had a lot of obstacles. There were a lot of things that he had to get done in order to make that happen. And, the world wasn't exactly working in his favor, so he had to create scenarios in order to convince people that his goal is right, or that war should happen. And one was the telegram. He wants to gain the southern regions of the German Confederacy that are kind of bordering against France. What does he need? He needs a war against France. So what does he do? He intercepts a telegram from King Wilhelm and basically forges it. He rewrites it, and that makes it sound like Wilhelm insults France. This upsets France. France gets all flamed up and all firing. Oh, we're going to get you back, and and ta-da! He has his war. How? Through forgery, through faking a letter, a telegram. This was called Machtpolitik, power politics, or real politics, realistic politics, practical, pragmatic politics. Whatever works is justified. It gets the job done. That was this kind of Machtpolitik that was sort of blossoming during this time frame. So, what do the French and the British need in order to demonize, to dehumanize, to ensure there's no support for Russia? Well, you need to create a false narrative. You need to create a demon. And Peter the Great was the perfect opportunity. He supposedly wrote a last will and testament in the 1700s that basically told the Russian people, this is my legacy, this is the blueprint for your future, do this, and this is what we will succeed in doing. Now, I'm going to just do some excerpts from this, and you tell me, what does this sound like? Do you see the bad? Do you see the malicious in this particular document? The all-powerful God, from whom we hold our life and our throne, meaning we is himself, after having revealed unto us his wishes and intentions, permits us to look upon Russia as called upon to establish her rule over all Europe. This is how he starts the will and testament, his last will and testament. It goes on. He lists some bullet points. These are not all of them, and they're not necessarily in order, but here are some. Keep the Russian nation at war at all times to keep her soldiers strong. Always find a battle, a war to fight, to keep your soldiers strong. Draw unto you captains of war and learned men from Europe, so Russia can benefit from the advantages of other nations. Basically, use them. Learn from them so that you can later defeat them with their own weapons, their own knowledge. 3, marry Russian princes with German princesses, attaching Germany to our cause. This is going to be huge through the remainder of the Tsar's realm. They will always go back to Europe for the princesses. They will always be trying to intertwine Germanic regions, Denmark, with the Tsar, the throne of Russia. And the question is it Is it malicious? Is it so that you can, basically win over these areas so that you can defeat them later? Or is it because Peter the Great really truly wanted to be more like Russia or more like Europe? If you don't remember the story, he leaves the throne and travels throughout Europe as a commoner, basically, learning how to build ships, going from England to Sweden to, it's everywhere. He's all over the place, learning himself what Europe is like, and then brought that learning back to Europe, or back to Russia, and tried to encourage Europe to come in and be a part of the Russian world. Was there an ulterior motive there, like this would suggest? Or was he really genuine, wanting to be part of the neighborhood kind of thing? You've got to pick one side or the other. Which one was it? He goes on. Make ties with England to build our trade and navy. It literally says, England's got ties everywhere. If you want to get good trade, good money, you got to partner with them, learn all the business tricks, and then you can be like they are. It wasn't to go over and build up England. It was, in this case, to, again, use their network, use their area, and then gain for yourself what you want. 2, do all in your power to approach closely Constantinople and India. That sounds applicable in the Crimean War. Remember that he who rules over these countries is the real sovereign of the world. So now he's expressing this desire to be sovereign over the world, conquer the whole world. That's your expansionism, right? Finally, he says, with Sweden dismembered, Persia conquered, Poland subjugated, Turkey beaten, our armies united, the Black and Baltic seas guarded with our vessels. Basically, he has done all this and has instructed how all this was to be done. Prepare secretly, first in France, then in Germany, to share the empire of the universe with Russia. France, you want to have part of our universal empire? We offer it to you. I'm not going to offer it to anybody else, but we'll offer it to you first. Germany, not letting France know the same conversations happening in Germany. Germany, we've had time with you for a long time. Our daughters, our princesses have been from your country, and your blood is our blood. We would like to share the universal empire, the world conquering with you. Would you like it? If one of them says yes, you flatter them and you throw lavishness at them, and then you cause one to crush the other. Now, if both decline, both say no, 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 then you raise a quarrel, a fight between them that will ruin both. Then Russia will pour her troops into Germany while at the same time advancing her troops and navies into the Mediterranean and the ocean, keeping France in check and destroying Germany with the other. With these two countries conquered, the remainder of Europe will fall under our yoke. Thus can Europe be subjugated. Now, do you hear the bad? Do you hear the malicious in this? Can you imagine that if Peter the Great, supposedly the founder of Russia, the great Tsar of Russia, were to have passed this will down and made it a part of the culture of Russia to conquer the world, to have this vast empire, and to crush all of Europe? Can you see why somebody could take that and use this to demonize them? Look, we got this last will and testament from Peter the Great, and look what they're doing. They are marrying a bunch of German princesses. Look, they are trying to go over and put up boundaries. They're moving into different Baltic territories. Look at them. They just went into Moldova. They just went into Wallachia. Isn't that what he said he was going to do? They're doing exactly what Peter the Great told them to do. This is their great move. It was a forgery. Peter the Great didn't write it. There was no such thing. Some historians, actually more and more historians now, are pointing to a Polish general who created this thing in the late 1700s and then slipped it to France during the revolutions to fire up France against Russia. Why? Well, because at the time, Poland was going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth between Prussia dominating it and Russia dominating it. And when Napoleon comes along, he's given this little document, and it justifies Napoleon's actions to move his army into Russia to attack Russia. It gives him an excuse. They're the bad guys. We need to free Poland. And the Polish people were the people that were able to give him something that made it work. And he used it. He used it to justify his invasion in Russia in 1812. This is Machtpolitik. This is Realpolitik. This is the Russian boogeyman becoming the successful example of manipulative geopolitics. He is bad. His intentions are malicious. This is a picture also from 1854. He is the grand monster bear who has a sword in one hand and destruction in his other, and all of the people below him are bowing before him, being subjugated to his ominous tyrannical reign. This is Russophobia, irrational fear of a country of what might be rather than what actually is, and fueling that fear until the people rise up and say, we got to do something about it. This is an illustration from or a piece of paper from one of the newspapers from London. It's February 1854. And I'm just going to read a little section of it. See if you can hear what Britain is propagating. It says, there are many names in history that are never mentioned without disfavor or condemnation. In this blacklist, the present Emperor of Russia promises to stand preeminent. The memory of the first Napoleon will shine like that of an angel of light in comparison with the blackness of guilt. That should be guilt. Guilt, which will enshroud that of Nicholas. The one had many national and high excuses for his ambition. The other had none but the meanest and most personal. He is the most selfish of war makers the modern times ever saw. To find his parallel, we must look to the dim traditions of savage ages. Civilized nations show nothing like him. This is even before the end of the war. This is at the beginning of the war. This is as Britain and France are about to jump into the war. Are they prepping their people? Are they riling them up? Are they demonizing Russia at this time? Is the Tsar all of these things that they claim he is? Where's the proof? Where's the evidence? I don't have to have evidence. I show you the last will and testimony of Peter the Great. But then, not only do you have to make a demon out of your enemy, but Machtpolitik, power politics, realistic, practical politics requires that you crush any of his supporters. Anybody that rises up with a, hey, what are you doing? Hey, that's not true. Hey, let's look at this from a rational standpoint. Anybody who stands up automatically becomes a sympathizer. And one such person during this time was Richard Cobden. He was a British gentleman. He was a merchant. So he knew trade. He understood trade. He understood business. Later in life, he became part of Parliament just prior to the Crimean War. He joined in the 40s. But he was an anti-interventionist, had an anti-intervention policy. You don't get involved with other people's business. Leave them alone. He believed that Russia is better than Turkey on so many different levels. And he wrote all of this in this big pamphlet that came out in 1836 called The Cure for the Russophobia. So it's not my term. This is 200 years ago. that this was being discussed. This is 15 some odd years, 20 years before the Crimean War, before any action really got up and running and starting. Yet, it's still a question. What to do with Russia? Should Russia take over the Ottoman Empire? Should they do that? Should Britain allow that to happen? And his argument is yes. Why not? It makes so much sense. Russia is Christian. Russia is part of the European Union, part of the European community. Russia has a stable government. It's a strong government. It has a good military. It can defend it. Makes good trade. There are so many different reasons why Russia is better than Turkey. Russians, he argues, are not expansionists. They're protectionists. There is no natural mountain range or anything that sort of protects Russia borders. They are kind of like open to anybody, any country that's butted up against them. They can come right through. In fact, Napoleon knows this. He actually accesses Russia or attacks Russia through this great northern plain that runs basically from all the way across Germany, across Poland, and into Russia. It's this big, gigantic flatland that has no obstacles. It's called the Polish Funnel, or the Poland Funnel. And Napoleon used it. He climbs right up through there and takes his whole army. It's a nice, easy peasy march. Goes right into it. There's nothing to stop him from advancing onto St. Petersburg, et cetera, et cetera. Hitler is going to do this again during World War II. He's going to do that and try to use that same path to get into Russia. It is a common thing. Russia needs boundaries. And since it doesn't have geographical boundaries like mountains and lakes and rivers and oceans, et cetera, it uses partnerships with little satellite countries that run all the way around the outside of it. And they're kind of allowing a protective border. If an army comes across and hits one of those particular areas, those satellite countries will give a pause. They're on Russia's side. They'll give a pause so that Russia has time to get its people. I mean, mind you, think about it. How are we going to travel or collect all those armies from everywhere across that landscape, pull them all over? That's going to take time. So by having those little satellite countries surrounding the borders, it was a way of protecting the empire because there was nothing else to stop people from invading. So he argues, Cobden argues, they're not expansionists, they're protectionists. If they take a country, it's because they want to make sure there's a border there. Russia's occupation of Constantinople, he argues, would benefit Europe, particularly England, hugely. I mean, not a little, but in the numbers of millions and millions of dollars, it would help. These are all argued. He argues this in 1836, and the result is that the establishment, however you want to call the establishment, fights back. Cobden is made a Russian sympathizer, and you must treat them the same as Russia. You must crush them, and you must do it publicly, and that's exactly what they do. So in 1854, as these cartoons that are putting down the Tsar, making him a demon, they are also putting down Cobden and another gentleman named John Bright, who both had. John was in Parliament. Cobden had left by then, but was still very active politically. In this cartoon, they are playing with this little tantrum spoiled brat that is supposed to be the Tsar Nicholas, and trying to placate him, trying to calm his little temper tantrum down over Crimea, and saying, oh, we just have to pacify him. We just give him another little toy and he'll be fine. And so they discredit him. They cancel culture him. And anybody who is rising up against them. And that's part of this warfare. And the hypocrisy is just all over the place. This gentleman, Mikhail Pogodin, He's a history professor at the University of Moscow. He's writing to Nicholas I in 1853, the year before. And he says, France takes Algeria from Turkey, and almost every year England annexes another Indian principality. None of this disturbs the balance of power. But when Russia occupies Moldavia or Wallachia, albeit only temporarily, that disturbs the balance of power. France occupies Rome and stays there several years during peacetime. That is nothing. But Russia only thinks of occupying Constantinople, and the peace of Europe is threatened. The English declare war on China, or on the Chinese, who have, it seems, offended them. No one has a right to intervene, but Russia is obligated to ask Europe for permission if it quarrels with its neighbor. England treats Greece, or threatens Greece to support the false claims of a miserable Jew and burns its fleet. That is a lawful action, but Russia demands a treaty to protect millions of Christians, and that is deemed to strengthen its position in the East at the expense of the balance of power. We can expect nothing from the West but blind hatred and malice. And if you think about it, we've already talked about the things that Britain had done. It had already colonized and created wars in India for its own self-gain. When China pushed it out and said, no, we don't want any more of your culture brought into our world, they decided to flood it with opium, to forcefully open gateways into that region for its money. And this is not all. There are many, many, many cases when this has happened. And so the hypocrisy was really real. You have to look at the whole. How can England and France justify putting down Russia in its actions when nobody can touch England or France or even put into question their actions around the world? And they literally were around the world. How is it that Russia was the bad guy, but everybody else was the good guy? So, Crimean War, 1853, Russia's thinking this is easy peasy. They take the first action and start moving against the Ottoman, and it's very successful. It works very well. This should be a slow or a very short war. However, for whatever reason, we have the demonization, the buildup of Russophobia or Russophobia in the West. Austria comes down, takes back the regions that Russia had taken over. France, Britain, along with Piedmont, Sardinia, they come along, they all start fighting against Russia and just pulverize them. I mean pulverize them. 55, it continues, and in 56 it ends. Now these convenient phobias, these hypocrisies continue through the 20th and 21st centuries. This is from 2008, and if you look at this one, doesn't that look familiar, that little graph? Russia, again, this time embodied in the person of Vladimir Putin, is viewed again as the octopus whose arms are going into all different regions, trying to suck up and expand to all different parts of Europe. I've just got back from Europe recently. We've had conversations about the Ukraine fiasco, things that are going on in Ukraine with Russia and Ukraine. The folks that we spoke to are either from the Ukraine, there's some from Russia, but there is this universal sort of mentality that Putin, Russia is the bad guy again. There's demonization going again. There's no possibility of any ulterior motive, no other possible reason for why the actions in Ukraine were taken. They are incredibly fearful and are told again and again, We got to put him down. We got to put Russia back in his place, because if we don't, his expansionism ideas are going to crawl all the way across Europe, and he's going to suck up Germany and Poland and all these other things, and it's going to happen all over again. The same kind of talk. World War I, same kind of talk. World War II, same kind of talk. McCarthyism in the late 40s and 1950s are going to put people on trial because they're sympathizers with communism, with Russia. When, again, we talked about the Russian invasion. And anybody who stands on Russian side is a sympathizer and must be crushed. It must be crushed, even if there's good reason to say he had reason to do what he did, or they had reason to do it. Not only that, but you want to see how this forging, this manipulative kind of geopolitical kind of work, this Machtpolitik, power politics, works in even our own elections in the United States. We're not isolated from this. 1816. Whoa, I'm going back. 2016 election. We have Hillary Clinton on one side, Donald Trump on another side, and all of a sudden, poof, we get the Steele dossiers proving that there's Russian collusion. Trump is a Russian spy. And it's used to cast dispersions upon him, even though he wins. He spends 4 years fighting, trying to prove that this is not true, that he is not a Russian spy, that there is no Russian collusion. We find out after millions of dollars, millions of taxpayers' dollars, all of the about what was going on, all that's gone, and we find out, no, it was a lie, it was a forgery, it was a paid-for document, it was a political stunt, it was another one of those last will and testaments of Peter the Great type of thing. Later, we had Russian interference with U.S. voting. That was another boogeyman. They're out to get us. Why Russia? Why not somebody else? Well, we got China now. China is starting to get that boogeyman kind of deal. We think about the coronavirus and what happened with the coronavirus. It was like, who is to blame? China. Well, who was in China doing what was going on with the virus? The United States. Why were they in China? Because it was not allowed in China. It was not allowed in the United States to do that kind of research. So let's go to China and let's do it there. Now, does that mean that we were at fault? Does that mean that we have some sort of blame? I have no idea. But history, forensically, by evidence, tells us that this was a very common, multiple time used strategy to change politics, to change the powers that be, to make things happen and make the people follow along. It's not conspiracy theory, it is just forensic evidence. It's a science of history. And I would ask you in this time that you would look for those connections. Go back to that question. Why did Britain and France fight against Russia? Why did they do that? Kind of makes you think of Machiavelli again, don't it? Kind of makes you wonder, did Machiavelli really know something back in his day? Did he have a pretty good pulse of the human heart? Human events are products of men animated by the same passions, and thus they necessarily have the same results. Maybe he knew something. Have a good day.